This is James Taylor, and you're listening to The Creative Life. The Creative Life podcast is a show created for you, the creative. If you're looking for inspiration, motivation, and advice while at home, at work, or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's a musician, writer, artist, designer, performer, educator, or creative entrepreneur. They share their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, their insights, and much, much more. In this episode, I speak with Roger Dooley. We talk about Brainfluence, neuromarketing, the two systems that are essential to understanding why people buy something, and Robert Cialdini's influence. Enjoy this episode. Hey there, it's James and I'm delighted today to be joined by Roger Dooley. Roger Dooley is the author of Brainfluence, 100 Ways to Persuade and Convince Consumers with Neuromarketing, and writes the popular blog Neuromarketing as well as Brainy Marketing at Forbes.com. He is the founder of Dooley Direct, a marketing consultancy, and co-founded College Confidential, the leading college band website. He's been a serial entrepreneur since he left a senior strategy position at a Fortune 1000 company to enter the then nascent home computer market. It's my great pleasure to have Roger on the show today. So welcome, Roger.
Well, thanks. Happy to be here, James.
So share with our listeners what's going on in your world just now.
Well, I guess that could be taken a lot of ways. We're recording this on a holiday weekend, so we enjoyed some pool time yesterday and some thunderstorms that came much later. So a typical holiday weekend, I guess. But I think from my personal standpoint or business standpoint, I'm continuing to observe the evolution of the neuromarketing industry and also our understanding as marketers of how our brains really work. I've been chronicling neuromarketing for about a dozen years now, and it's really gone from sort of a very fringe, almost snake oil type of industry to something that's a lot more sophisticated, and also it's becoming more accessible to smaller businesses.
It's fascinating as well where it seems to be going. I know you write a lot about this on the blog as well, in terms of how the technology side is coming into it now with facial recognition and obviously Facebook and the huge amount of data that companies and organizations have on you, and then cross-referencing that with personality types, and then adding onto that the neuromarketing that you cover is a pretty fascinating time to be alive just now, isn't it?
I guess, or scary, depending on the way you look at it. But yeah, it is. And I think that we're just really seeing the beginning of this effort to combine personal psychographic data or personality data with our marketing efforts. And I think that all of these things have the opportunity to be used for good or for evil in the same way that it's true of any kind of advertising. You can misrepresent your product or you can present it honestly. You can omit important information in order to close a sale, or you can be upfront and honest. And I think in the case of neuromarketing, to give people more targeted and appropriate ads, I think that you could view that as manipulative, but on the other hand, how annoying is it to be bombarded every day by thousands of ads that have absolutely nothing to do with what interests you? Personally, when I see an ad for a product that I've already viewed, which is a pretty simple application of retargeting or remarketing, I look at that and say, oh, yeah, I looked at that product yesterday. And then the first time it happened, I thought, well, that was a little bit creepy. How do they know what I was looking at on Amazon yesterday? But I think when you ponder it a bit, it's much better to have that kind of ad than something for a totally irrelevant product. And the same goes for improving TV commercials using neuromarketing techniques or I think initially there was this belief that somehow advertisers would create these amazingly powerful super ads that would sort of exercise mind control over consumers and turn them into buying drones. But in fact, that really isn't how it works. If that formula existed, advertisers would have discovered it a long time ago, even without neuromarketing. But what it does have the potential to do is screen out some of those horrible ads that don't engage our brains at all, that we find annoying, that are simply so boring that they don't even penetrate our consciousness. Because again, those don't do anybody any good. They don't do the advertiser any good. It's wasted money for them. And of course, they don't do us any good if we have to sit through this. It'd be much better to sit through an entertaining commercial or a commercial that at least related to something that we were interested in.
Well, one of the things that you say in the book is, there's this quote here, we all like to think that there are good reasons for what we do and that our decisions result from a conscious, deliberative process. And although certainly there are rational components to many of our decisions and actions, researchers are constantly exposing new ways in which our subconscious drives our choices, often with minimal conscious involvement. The minimal conscious involvement I find really quite fascinating. So talk about that in terms of what is going on just now. For example, we have an election that's coming up here in the UK, where I'm speaking to you from today, and I'm seeing different political parties using ads in different ways and kind of layering that over with some, what you might class some of the kind of neuromarketing side as well. So can you talk to us about when it comes to someone beginning to make a decision, let's say someone voting, for example, on a particular party, what are some of the ways that marketers are using neuromarketing and the science that's coming out of neuroscience to have them do what they want you to do?
Right. Well, I think what I'll do is look back at two recent elections in your country and mine as examples of that sort of rational, logical decision-making process versus emotional and non-conscious decision-making. I think in the case of the Brexit vote, which the outcome surprised many, many people, the folks who were opposed to Britain leaving the EU were very logical, rational. They advanced all these particular reasons why it would be bad for the economy, the flow of products across borders, immigration issues, freedom of movement, employment, and so on. And this all made total sense. And I think that if you took an impartial, logical observer, they might say, well, on balance, it makes sense to stay because of all these factors. The opponent or the proponents of Brexit used largely emotional arguments, and those ended up being apparently effective enough to carry the day. And I think we saw the same thing in the U.S. election. Looking at the way Hillary Clinton presented herself and her policies, often she was very logical, rational. I remember looking at her immigration policy, which was this very well-reasoned policy that had a lot of nuance in it because there were like 9 points. You had to provide a path to citizenship that made it possible for people to become citizens, but at the same time didn't let people who should become citizens. And she had a couple of acronym policies that I don't even know what these were, but that would be continued or modified for, and one would last for a particular amount of time. And, after reading a few of these, your eyes would just glaze over. And it was probably really important stuff. And if you were, in fact, developing an immigration policy, these are exactly the kinds of issues that you would need to be concerned about. But Trump said, I'll build a wall. Now, that's something that is a totally emotional statement. It resonates. People can immediately, both consciously and non-consciously, their brain can grasp, a big wall that's going to solve our immigration problems. And now, from a logical point of view, that doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, it may be part of a much bigger policy, but it was a very simple idea, and that's pretty much as far as Trump went in describing his immigration policy. I'll build a wall. And that really resonated. Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize winner, divides our thought processes into system 1 and system 2. And system 1 is what's called the default mode. In other words, we're normally operating in that mode. And it's very quick, emotional. It's rule-based. That worked for me last time, so I'll do it again without actually thinking about it or thinking it through. And it's very energy efficient. System 2 is that sort of logical, rational, grind through it kind of thinking where you add up pluses and minuses and look at pros and cons and so on. And that's rather energy intensive. Our brains don't like to be in that System 2 mode, so they will always try and get out of that and back to System 1. And if you look at the two elections I talked about, one side was appealing to System 2, which is that sort of uncomfortable form of thinking discovered by Kahneman, and the other side, which was the victor in both cases, was appealing to System 1.
So all is all lost then, as marketers and people are looking to sell their ideas or sell their messages. Do we just have to throw in our lot and say, okay, we're going to go with System 1? This the way that people make decisions, primarily not for rational reasons, but very much for emotional reasons. Is that the way that we have to go, or is there a way of kind of bringing in that more rational mind into helping people understand why they should buy your product or why they should buy your message?
Well, I think the important thing is to recognize that both elements are important. It's pretty rare that an effective ad is all one or all the other. Fragrance ads, perhaps, are mostly System 1. They're very emotional. They don't talk about the product, how good it smells, or how many people use it, or anything like that. They just show you a picture of an attractive person in some kind of perhaps a romantic setting, and let that emotion pretty much sell the product. But that's the exception. In most cases, people have multiple needs. A product has to fill some kind of an actual need in many cases. If you're buying a car, it's got to have certain characteristics that you need. It has to hold the right number of passengers for your family. It has to get perhaps a certain amount of fuel mileage so that you know that you can afford it. It has to be in some kind of a price range that is affordable to you, and so on. So there's certainly multiple rational components that go into that. But beyond that, and the automakers are certainly aware of this, there's a lot of emotion that goes into it too. So they will try and present you emotional images that are appropriate for the vehicle. So if you are advertising a Jeep, you may show a family camping in the woods where they they got to in their four-wheel drive Jeep, where a luxury sedan might show an attractive, very well-dressed couple getting out in front of a five-star hotel or a setting like that. So they use emotion quite a bit to position the product and make you want it. But then they also have the information available that you can determine if it will meet your needs or not. And, I think a good example is Amazon, okay? Amazon is by all appearances, a very logical, rational retailer. You look at their product page, it doesn't even look designed. It looks like a whole bunch of information thrown onto a web page in not a haphazard fashion, but it doesn't look like a graphic designer really had his or her way with it. But when I looked at this a while ago, I found just above the fold, and that being the area that's visible on the first screen when you navigate to that product page. And of course, it varies depending on the device and the computer resolution if you're using a laptop or some other kind of a monitor and so on. But roughly above the fold, I found about 6 or 7 non-conscious cues. They use social proof, which is one of Cialdini's principles, and that is if you see other people doing something, you are more likely to do it yourself. They use social proof by showing you the number of people that have reviewed a product and also the star ratings for the reviews. They use authority by presenting very prominently expert reviews, at least for books and products that have those kinds of reviews readily available. They use, and that's another Cialdini principle, and yet another is scarcity. Things that are in short supply are more desirable. And there's a lot of research behind that. Even when there's no logical reason for that product to be more desirable, it is if it appears to be scarce. So when they're getting low in stock, they put in red next to the buy button, only 8 left in stock. Don't miss out. Buy now. They use free, which research by Dan Ariely and others showed was a very powerful motivator. Again, beyond whatever the actual cost differences or savings might be, just the word free lights up our brains. and they use free in multiple contexts in that little area above the fold. So they're a pretty sophisticated marketer who addresses those non-conscious needs, but of course they've got all the information available there too.
So they're going at both sides as well. And I'm interested, with like something like Amazon and other places where you have to make choices between multiple options. You mentioned the book. There was a study using fMRI scanning to see what happens in the brains when we're trying to choose between options. And the researchers found that choosing between two equally attractive options causes like irritation in the mind of the person, because they're having this difficulty in kind of choosing. But when another less attractive option was offered, the choice process becomes much easier and much more pleasurable. So is that kind of going back to that almost like systems one, reducing energy load? It's a very kind of
that's based on some work by Dan Ariely, who's really he's the author of Predictably Irrational, a book I highly recommend. It sort of disproves the fact that we're logical, rational beings with a lot of his original research, and the experiments that he conducted showed that a slightly less attractive alternative made the other alternative better. And he used an experiment that offered people a newspaper subscription as a financial newspaper, and they could either get a print subscription for $65 or an internet subscription for $65, or a print subscription for or internet and print for $125. And these numbers are from memory, but people overwhelmingly chose the cheaper version. But then he did something really strange. He put it a print-only version at the same price as the internet and print. And you would say, well, nobody would be stupid enough to buy the print-only version. But what it did was it greatly increased preference for the much more expensive option, to the point where like 85% of the people chose the more expensive option just because of the presence of that slightly inferior option at the same price. And so marketers can use that by having a slightly less attractive alternative at either the same price or a slightly lower price, and that makes the other one look better. And that's just one of these weird quirks that scientists have discovered in the way we think.
Now, one of the challenges you had in writing the book was making these choices between different options in terms of the structure of the book as well. So just kind of talking about your creative process just now. In the writing of Brainfluence, talk to us about maybe some of the struggle that you had, because I know that is not an easy book to write. There's obviously there's a lot of research that goes in behind it as well. You're thinking about the structure, but at the same time you want it to be as accessible to as many people as possible as well. So talk to us about that process, that creative process of writing that book.
Right. Well, I think my challenge was I'd been studying the field already for about 5 or 6 years or more. Actually, even more than that, probably about 7 by the time I started thinking about the book, and maybe another year by the time I actually got the book deal and I had to write it. So I had a lot of knowledge, and of course, an author always wants to put all their information into a book to make it the best possible book, and I really struggled, though, because talking about brains and neuroscience and behavior science can get kind of technical and complicated, and I wanted something that business people would enjoy and use, and say, hey, okay, I got some good ideas from this. And I initially started off with sort of a conventional approach of writing about how the brain works as a way of easing people into the topic of, okay, now here's how you can apply that knowledge of how the brain works. And I really struggled with that, trying to make that interesting. And it wasn't until I pretty much abandoned that approach and came up with an alternate structure of 100 short chapters, each with pretty much one research concept or one scientific concept, and then how to apply that in business and marketing. Once I had that structure, then things started to really click and flow into place. But sort of getting past that initial structural hurdle was the hard part.
I'm thinking your years of being a blogger as well, where you're used to condensing information into those 500 words or the equivalent of a chapter like that, those shorter chapters. That would become very useful then.
Oh yeah, definitely, for sure.
So, so you kind of came out with the book. Obviously, there was a lot of great, and I think it's been translated into 8 languages now. I think I saw it in Spanish. Mm-hmm. I saw it in Spanish in a store the other day as well. So, how does that feel for yourself as a writer, having that kind of influence and having business people and other people kind of come up to you saying how they're using what you're teaching in neuromarketing?
Well, to me, it's really enjoyable to get feedback like that, and it motivates me to keep on doing it. Whenever somebody says, "Hey, I got an idea from your book or from a blog post or something I've written someplace," and I tried it and it worked, that to me is the best feedback an author can get because it really motivates you to keep on going, to dig out new useful information, come up with new techniques, and so on. And so that's great. So I'd encourage all your listeners that if you read a book, and not just mine, but if you read any author's book and it has an impact on your life, your business, or even perhaps some small part of your business, by all means, drop them a quick email. It's very easy to find authors these days. You can find them on Twitter. You can find them on their author website. They will appreciate that feedback.
Absolutely. That's the power, especially of Twitter now. I use that all the time. If I read a book and it impacts me in some way, or I'll either tweet the person and message them as well to let them know the impact upon me. Or actually, what I've started doing recently is I've actually started doing a series of little videos of just like one thing that I've taken from that book as well, and so it ends up being a little bit of a meme, I suppose. It starts from that author's book, and then it goes out and in other ways. I mentioned at the top of the show, you've done a number of different things in your life and the work that you've done. One thing that I mentioned is you co-founded something called College Confidential. What was that, and how did that come about?
Well, it grew out of my own process of going through the college admissions effort with my 2 children who are now adults. And what I found was that even though our family is probably better equipped than most, I had a couple of degrees and had been through the process myself, and we had moderate financial resources, so we were certainly better off than some folks. It was still incredibly confusing and arcane, and there just wasn't a lot of good information out there. And this was just in the fairly early days of the internet. I mean, the internet was certainly going, but the World Wide Web was going, but there wasn't that much good information available either in books or on the web. So having been through that effort, I connected with a couple of college experts, and we created a website that was meant to demystify some aspects of the college admissions process. And I guess I'd add that in the U.S., it's a little bit different than in many other countries. We have 3,000 to 4,000 institutions of higher education, so nobody can know them all. A school's counselor will probably know a few dozen schools, if that, maybe even less than 10 schools very well, and maybe a few dozen schools moderately well. And the farther away you get from the geographic area where the student is located, the more remote and mystifying these schools are. So it's a real challenge to figure out where to go to school and also how to get in. And that's the other aspect. Everybody wants to get into a handful of name brand schools where the admissions requirements are not all that well defined. You have to not only be absolutely outstanding academically, but typically have some other aspect or aspects to your life that really make you stand out. So it's a very confusing process. And so I hooked up with a couple of college experts. We created this website, and I put in a community there because I recognize that there's no way that even experts writing all the time could answer even a fraction of a percent of all the questions that people would have. And what that did was it created sort of a crowdsourced information base where somebody who was in California and wanted to know something about a school in rural New York State might actually connect with somebody from somebody who had been to that school, whose child had gone to the school or was currently in the school, or maybe somebody from the town where the school is located, where they could tell you what the reputation is locally, and so on and so on. And it took a while to build that critical mass, because any sort of crowdsourcing effort requires a critical mass. But it really turned into a phenomenal resource where people get great advice. And we talked about how it makes you feel when somebody says, "Hey, I read your book and I got this great idea for my business." To me, what's even more powerful for me is when a student says, "Hey, I got into my dream school, or I found my dream school because of the help I got on College Confidential." And to me, that when you talk about helping people and encountering a life-changing experience, and obviously these folks had a lot going for them. They might have found it and got in there without that particular website, but to me that was really very powerful, and it was a motivator to keep going in the early years, because even early on we started to get feedback like that, because it provided so much more information than was available through conventional sources. And we sold the business some years ago now, in 2008, to part of the Daily Mail Group from your part of the world.
Yeah, and that's an example there of, that's a high cost decision someone's going to make. I don't know, in the States now, it's in terms of the cost of an average college education, maybe $100,000 plus, I would imagine. So that's something you would think would be governed by rational, making decisions in a very rational way. But you would have seen the data that was going on there, I'm sure, in terms of how people were making decisions between different institutions. So with your knowledge in terms of the stuff that you do with Brainfluence and neuromarketing, could you see some of those System 1 effects kind of going on there?
Absolutely. I would say that most college decision-making is driven more by emotion. And even the experts will tell you that. If you listen to a true college expert, they'll tell you that the school that you attend, and particularly its brand name, is not going to be the biggest impact on your future career prospects and your future life. Yes, it will change your life in many ways. You make unique friends and so on. But if you were a student capable of getting into Harvard, but instead decide to go to your state university instead, you'll probably still do fine, because most of your long-term success depends on you and the fact that you were smart enough and diligent enough and focused enough to get into school with crazy admissions requirements means that you will probably succeed regardless of where your degree comes from. But nevertheless, people are encouraged, visit the school, see if you really like it. If you fall in love, then it's the right place, which is probably not the best advice. It is a very expensive decision. The more costly schools these days are more like $250,000 if you happen to be paying full freight. So it's a hugely expensive decision, but also it's a once in a lifetime decision. You can once you get your undergraduate degree, that's pretty much defined. You can transfer if you go to someplace and absolutely hate it or want something else, you can't transfer, but you never get a second undergraduate degree. You instead go for a graduate degree, and you're always sort of identified as being a Notre Dame person or a Princeton person, even if you went on to MIT or Caltech or someplace for your graduate degrees. So it's a very high stakes decision, although, as I pointed out, it's not always as high impact as people believe it is. Like the flip side of the College Confidential community is you see people who basically believe their life will be over if they don't get into their dream school, which whatever that is. It might be. It's bad when it's a really unattainable school like one of the Ivies, because even super qualified students get rejected in droves. And so when somebody says, "Well, this is what I have to do," it's certainly folks in the community try and disabuse them of that notion that that's the only place that's right for them.
And you mentioned like College Confidential was obviously a great resource for parents, people that were planning to go to college. What online resources, tools, or mobile apps like Evernote, for example, do you use and love, and you find really useful for yourself as a writer?
Well, as a writer, I've been pushing myself to use Scrivener as my writing tool, and it's a very powerful tool that lets you move content around, particularly for, say, writing a book or something very long document, which gets unwieldy in Microsoft Word, which is what I've always used. So that's one tool, and the downside is it has a fairly brutal learning curve. But I wouldn't say I've mastered it, but I've become functional in it. As far as simpler apps, I use for my collection of background material for writing. I use Evernote. I use that for a lot of stuff. When I see something interesting, I will dump it into that I want to see in the future. I'll dump it into Evernote. And that integrates with Google search. And it's kind of funny because I'll search Google for a particular topic. And because of that Evernote feature, I'll find that, oh, yeah, I already saved an article about this exact thing that I'd forgotten about. So that's to me, that's very powerful. I use Pocket for delayed or deferred reading. One of the things when you're on the internet constantly and you have to consume content. I mean, I have to read a lot of stuff to stay abreast of my various topics of interest, not to mention the stuff that isn't necessarily work related, but I find that it would be an interesting article to read. Instead of distracting myself at the moment when I run across it or bookmarking it, which I've probably got a million articles bookmarked that have scrolled off into oblivion that I've never looked at, I dump it into Pocket. And this works across all my devices. I can read on the computer. I can read on my iPad or even my phone. So if I've got a few free minutes someplace, I can just fire it up and maybe consume an article or two. And I can also save it to Evernote from there. If I say, okay, this is something I really want to keep, I can share it from there if I want to do that. So that's a tool that I find very powerful, and it increases my productivity by allowing me to save stuff for later consumption instead of thinking, oh, if I don't read this right now, I'm probably going to forget about it. The other app I use quite a bit is Todoist. It's a to-do app, and again, that integrates across all my devices. It integrates with Gmail, with Google Calendar, and that really helps me focus on what I've got to do today. I can it's easy to schedule stuff into the future and so on.
And these are great. I personally use Scrivener, and I use Evernote as well, and they're great apps. And interesting because I've had a number of guests recently that have been using Pocket, and I've always wondered like the choice between using Pocket and Evernote. But so it's interesting to see how you use them in a complementary fashion as well. So
like Evernote, it strips out all the junk in the article. And that's another big time saver because as you know, whenever you go to a content site, the objective of the designers of that site is to increase your time on site and show you more ads and have nice metrics for their advertisers, about how long their visitors stay. So they will entice you with all these cool article links that are relevant to the one you're reading, or maybe are just clickbait type articles that are hard to resist. All that stuff goes away with both Evernote and with Pocket. So, and I think the nice thing about Pocket is that you just fire it up and it's like a magazine that you created. Your stuff is there in a very visual fashion, and you can just flip through it. You can delete an article very quickly if you find you get 2 paragraphs in, say, okay, I got the idea here, or this doesn't interest me, delete it and move on. It's a fundamentally different experience than Evernote, but it's only for consuming content. It's not really the best thing, I don't think, for long-term storage of ideas or material.
Great. And we'll put all these in the show notes. People go to jamestaylor.me and just type in Roger Dooley. You're going to get all these links as well. And what about if you were to recommend just one record and one book to our listeners? What would they be?
A record?
Yeah, or an album, a record.
Or wow! Yeah, wow, boy, that's old school.
See, I'm using old vinyl terminology.
Yeah,
well.
Strangely enough, what I listen to most is I use focus music, and I actually don't know the name of the
is that
what I listen to, but
is that focus at will?
It's music to concentrate by, and it comes in. I don't have a particular artist to recommend, but if you search the music service of your choice or even YouTube, you'll find these. And what I'll do is when I'm working, I'll fire up. Some are very long. I think there's a YouTube recording that is about 3 hours in length, and it's just very almost environmental, not really new age, but very, very subtle music. Put it on very quietly with noise-canceling headphones, and the outside world goes away completely, and you can focus. So I don't have a specific album, vinyl or otherwise, but that's would be my suggestion. I do listen to other kinds of music, but that's what I would recommend. I'm sorry.
And the book, what would your book be?
I mentioned Daniel Kahneman before, Thinking Fast and Slow. And to me, that is, there are so many books that I could recommend, but to me, that's a great place to start. Even though he's a really smart guy and a Nobel Prize winner, it's very accessible. And if you want to understand how people think and make decisions, it's really a great starting point.
And a final question for you, Roger. Let's imagine if you woke up tomorrow morning and had to start from scratch. So you have all the tools of your trade and the knowledge that you've acquired, but you know no one knows you. How would you restart? What would you do?
I think I would probably put up a website, James, and I'd start writing because I think it's a process that sort of feeds on itself. You can read a lot of stuff and learn, but when you start explaining those things to other people, that's when you really achieve understanding yourself. So to me, it's a process where even as you're educating yourself, you are also starting to build your reputation, build traffic perhaps. And I would employ some of the other digital marketing tools that I've used over the years to make sure that people are able to find my stuff and so on. But I think that's what I would start doing. But see, I guess I'm focused on a writing-related activity. I'm not really into e-commerce these days or something like that. I would probably have a different answer if I was.
And I mentioned a couple of you have got a couple of blogs, but where's the best place for people to go to read your work, to learn more about your books and the other things you've got going on?
The best starting point is rogerdooley.com. That's ROGERDOOLEY.com. And I'm on Twitter at Roger Dooley, and generally easy to find across all my social networks. But at that website, I've got jumping off points to my neuromarketing blog, my Forbes blog, my books, and so on.
Well, Roger, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you today, learning more about neuromarketing. I'm now going to, whatever the next purchase I make, I'm going to be thinking in the back of my head how if I'm operating from a system 1 or a system 2 primarily. So I'll be thinking about that next time. Thank you so much for coming on, Roger, and I wish you all the best with your next book.
Well, thank you, James. It's been a lot of fun.
Hey, James Taylor here again. And if you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to jamestaylor.me. That's jamestaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.